Welcome to the Gloriously Unready podcast, all about being unready for anything. I'm Josephine Hughes, and this series is about becoming the mum of transgender children. Everyone's agreed to me sharing my story, but I'm mentioning no names. And sometimes I use clumsy language. Please bear with me, I'm still learning. I don't mean any harm by it. So today I am doing a special edition of the podcast on special request from a lot of people who've asked if my husband can come onto the podcast and tell us about his experience and what it is like to be a dad when your kids come out as transgender. And I think in particular, because I was asked the question on a podcast and he said, "You didn't give enough of my story." So here he is. So, Tim, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, indeed. Okay, so I am Tim. I am Josephine's husband of 35 years, 35 years. And what do I do? I, as well as being father to our three lovely kids, I am a computer programmer, and I've worked in the City of London for large financial institutions, various large financial institutions, again, over the last 25 to 30 years. So I commute up and down to London most days a week.
One of the questions that people would really like to know about is how you found out that the kids were transgender. And as a little reminder to people, we've got two transgender daughters. So we did have 3 male children, assigned male at birth. And then we found out that 2 of them were actually women. So for me, the way it happened was the youngest one came out to me just before they left for school one morning. They were just coming up to their 17th birthday. And when we were discussing why a particular relationship hadn't worked out, they said it was because they thought they were a girl. And then subsequently, a few months later, my oldest child came out to me after she'd returned from a trip to the States where she'd actually tried out her female persona. So that's my side of the story. And Tim, what was it like for you and what happened? How did you find out?
As I remember it, certainly when our youngest came out to you, I think I had a phone call from you, a bit vague, saying there's something. I think you said something like, "There's something, I need to chat to you about. It's not too major, don't worry. But I really need to talk when we get home." I'd absolutely no idea, and I certainly didn't suspect what eventually transpired. Yeah, so I came home as usual. You told me rather than our youngest, and then we had a talk about it, and probably just sort of sat there with our mouths open slightly for a while, thinking, what does this mean? And I think to start with, it's just shocking. It is just shocking. You don't expect it. We had no inkling at all that this was happening, or that was how our youngest, or even our oldest, how they were feeling. There were no hints that this was going to happen. So it really was just pow. It's happened, and so I think out of the blue. So I think there was just a moment of, I'm gonna have to. That's gonna take a while to sink in.
And what sort of did you go through following that revelation?
Good question. Yeah. So I think you go through all the different stages. I mean, I think now, and we've talked about this, and you've talked about it very openly and very honestly. I think initially, because we knew it was a world that we didn't really know about, other than perhaps through the lens of sort of popular media. The first thing that kicks in is, in fact, the phobia, the fear. I think, because you think, this is a terrible decision, it's going to ruin their lives. That's there. And of course, over time, as as we've come to see them grow and settle into their adult selves and become very happy, you realise it was just a, misinformation and you just ignorance, really. You don't know what it means because it's not your world. The popular media, even then, 7 or 8 years ago, was pretty not unfriendly, but just, it was unfriendly. I mean, it's always been unfriendly. And so your view of what it means is completely skewed. And so you end up with just fear of the unknown, or fear that it's a terrible mistake, or all the memes and the tropes that are still going today are just there in your mind. So, and I suppose it's part of being a parent, isn't it? Just regardless of the trans bit, it's just part of being a parent. Your kids make a decision about their lives that you don't really understand. And all of a sudden that parent reflex kicks in of, is this a terrible mistake? Are they going to ruin their lives? Are they going to regret this forever? It's almost a reflex. You can't help it. And so you just do the worried parent bit.
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with the trans bit. The parent reflex just kicks in, and you want to make sure you're away into catastrophizing that it's the end of everything. When of course it's quite clearly not. I mean, quite clearly it's the best thing that's happened for both of them, because both of them we see now through the journey, and the journey's not entirely smooth, although pretty smooth for our two, I would say. Certainly from the outside, from our perspective, you see them just grow into delightful young adults. Well, proper adult. I mean, they're full adults now. We can't call them young adults anymore because they're just adults. The people that they're meant to be, and they're really, really happy, well-adjusted, just doing their stuff and having a living a good life.
Yeah.
And what more can you ask? What more can you ask?
So just sort of going back a little bit, you said, you had all these fears about what it would mean for them. Could you sort of outline what were the fears that you had? What were the things that you were really worried about?
The first and foremost, and again, I think that probably comes from the popular media sort of emphasis. You immediately go to the medical implications. You immediately go to medical transition and, what that means for them changing their bodies, indulging in things which are going to radically change their bodies. I'm not a scientist, I'm a computer programmer, but I have a bit of a scientific mind, so you worry about sort of fairly heavy duty intervention, the side effects, coercing your body into something which it's not really. You worry about that. But in actual fact, having said that, again, it's all part of the journey. When you start to look at the science and the medicine and respect to the medical professionals who've done all the work on this, you look at it and think, this is way safer than a lot of stuff we just accept as normal. So anyway, we were talking about what things you're worried about. So yeah, the medical side, I think was one. I think you worry about how they'll fit into society. Society is not safe for some folks who are different, and that I think that goes right across the rainbow spectrum. So you worry, are they going to be safe? Are they going to be all right? Are they going to be preyed upon by people? Are they just putting themselves in a vulnerable situation? Again, that up until now, that hasn't been our experience. So again, a sort of slightly unjustified fear. And I suppose you worry. I mean, our youngest wasn't that young when they came out. They weren't a child.
Yeah,
they were really just
17.
right on the cusp of of being a full adult. So you do also, again, and this is a trope that's still being preyed upon in the media at the moment. You do worry about regret. You're going to do this. You're going to make irreversible changes to yourself and your life. What happens if? What if you just get into the what if you change your mind and you've made these changes and you realise that perhaps you shouldn't have. Again, it's just it's just ignorance. The regret rate for transition is really, really low.
Yeah, I was going to say the regret rate is higher for simple things like knee operations or hip operations than it is for gender affirming care.
Yeah. If you're going to base your resistance to acceptance of trans people on the regret rate, then you're going to have to give up a load of other medical procedures that if you're going to ban medical procedures on the basis of regret rate, transitioning for trans people is way down there. There's loads more stuff you're going to have to stop doing. So if that's going to be your criteria.
So do you think you went through a grieving process? Because for you, you were the dad of 3 boys. Did you feel that you'd lost something?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you can see the stages of being married to a counsellor. You know what the stages of grief are.
Yeah.
you've seen the charts and you see the diagram, and I'm certain that we went through both of us. On reflection, went through some of that, the denial, and through eventual acceptance. It wasn't grief in the sense of a huge loss, because I would say my relationship with our kids is not based on the fact that we're blokes. It's based on the fact that we're nerds. And we're
Very true.
and that hasn't changed. So I haven't lost that part of our relationship, because it's still, what it's like. We can still have conversations that are completely incomprehensible to me, to you, and we haven't lost that. So we've never been a sort of football going out drinking. We've never had a very masculine relationship. And therefore, that's completely unaffected by how they present themselves. Completely unaffected.
It's a really interesting thought, actually, Tim, because I've never really thought about this before. But do you think that part of the reason why you haven't got a masculine relationship with them is because...
do you think it's been that all along?
Well, it has, hasn't it? And do you think that's partly because they aren't really masculine?
They aren't really masculine. I mean, I would say... it's not masculine as in the very physical masculine. I mean, some of our sort of geeky, nerdy stuff is quite, some of the computer gamey type stuff. You think that's a quite masculine. That's probably how we bond. Playing the running, gunning, shooting online games and that sort of stuff, and some of the war gaming type stuff. Perhaps it's
but it's interesting.
But that's, we still do that.
Although less with those two and more with our cisgender son, I think they're running and shooting stuff.
Yes.
It's interesting, isn't it? So it's such an interesting thought. And then you get into what exactly, our viewpoints of what's masculine and feminine.
Well, it does.
And the way the kids have challenged that.
Yeah, absolutely. You would have to say now, those things, certainly our relationships are, that is independent of gender.
Don't you think that you and I, in terms of feminine and masculine roles, we are much more sort of gender stereotypical than
that you stayed at home, looked after the kids, and I commuted up to London for 30 years.
You played computer games and
I played
football.
Computer games and football on the three occasions. I actually managed to get them out in the garden to kick a football around.
You never managed to play football with them.
We never managed. No.
Gave up on that one when they were very small, I think.
Yeah.
It is just interesting, isn't it, to think about, because a lot of people ask me, do you think there are any signs? And I've always said, no, I don't think there was. But I don't know what you think. Yeah,
again, when we've talked about this, I think both of us wouldn't have been surprised if one or other of them had come out and said, I'm gay. That wouldn't have been a complete surprise.
So what would you say? Because I know what gender critical people would say at this point. And their argument is that they're not really transgender, they're gay.
Well, you know the particular circumstances, and you know the differences in the relationship between the youngest and the oldest and their partners and the sorts of partners they choose. And in fact, it's completely the other way round.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
It's completely the other way round. You know, the one who I would have said, you know, they'll probably come out as gay.
Yeah.
And that would, you know, that would be fine. I wouldn't be surprised. In actual fact, would have would now have what would be termed as a gay relationship, because they present as they present as a woman and they're attracted to women.
Yeah. They are a woman and they're attracted to women.
They are a woman, yeah, and they are a woman and they're attracted to women. And then the other one is a woman married to a bloke.
And it's the other way around to what we would have
expected. And it's the other way around
to
perhaps you would have expected. So, yeah.
So do you think that, this is a really interesting thought, do you think there's any sort of difference in the relationship with them now? I mean, do you think that there's a difference in how you relate to them because they're women? I think for me, there probably is particularly with our youngest in terms of, you know, she's so interested in fashion, and that means that I relate to her much more in terms of talking about what I'm wearing and clothing and that sort of stuff. I mean, do you think there's been any... That's changed for me, because I wouldn't have done that before, and she didn't actually show any interest in clothes before she transitioned, and then suddenly this whole side of her's come out that's really interested in fashion. Do you think there's any change in the way you've related to them as women?
No, I don't. No, I don't particularly think so. No, not on a meaningful level. I mean, I could make a joke that it's obviously just when we go shopping with the youngest one, it's now more expensive. Because they're far more interested in clothes than they ever were.
As am I. So when we go out,
yes,
we
as
tend
are
to treat her
you.
a
So
bit
it gets
more.
really expensive. But no, I think in terms of how I relate to them, I don't think.
I think you're still their dad, really, aren't you? And
Yeah. I'm still their dad. The things we had in common before, we still have in common. The new things that they might be, you know, more interested in, don't get in the way, or how we relate, I wouldn't say has changed significantly from my perspective.
Because I mean, what that's coming up for me, and I know this is something that, you know, really is very sort of important in my heart, is families falling out with each other over the children being transgender. And I wonder if you could say something a bit more about sort of how you feel that as parents we can respond to, I'm going to say young adults, not children, because I think it's important to make the distinction there. But, you know, how as parents, you know, we can relate to our kids coming out and the sort of response we should have in thinking about. It can be really, really difficult for families to readjust to this. So what would your sort of advice be really about this?
Yeah, I would say, I think based on our experience, I would say first and foremost, I suppose it was Douglas Adams, isn't it? Don't panic. Don't panic, and don't be hasty. Take your time. Take your time, particularly with young adults. You've got more time than you think, and so take your time. And that was our experience, you know, because a lot of that stuff, like we said, you know, this sort of ignorance and the phobia and the stuff, because it's not a situation that you either were expecting or know very much about. So I would say don't react in haste. And again, with, you know, with all the stuff that your kids do, well, they're not kids, you know, at that point they're adults, and so it's their choice to make. And as a parent, you know, it's your job to be there to support them, to to let them know that they've got that love and support behind them, and that they can make those choices with confidence, and knowing that you'll be there. Because if you think about it, even if your worst fears come true, suppose they do make a terrible mistake, the thing they are really going to need at that point is the love, care and support of their family. They're going to need you more than ever. If your worst fears come true, at that point, they are going to really need you. So it's better not to have fallen out in the early days, so that if it does go terribly wrong, which it probably won't, but if it does, they will know that you are there, that you've got their back, you'll catch them if they fall. So don't lose that in the initial shock, and just make sure that you're still there and you're their safety net to back them up. And and the advice is, go along for the journey. It'll be great. You'll learn things you never even imagined were things.
Yeah.
And as long as you, as long as you go along for the ride, I think you probably quite enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We certainly have. We certainly have. I mean, first and foremost, the beautiful experience of seeing your kids sort of unfold and blossom and grow into the people they are is fantastic, and don't miss out on that. Don't miss out on that. But then the people we've met along the way because of this, great, who we wouldn't have met otherwise. The folks we met the other day. The LGBT crew. What a great group. What a great group of lovely people. We'd have never met them.
Yeah, it's opened up.
It's opened up a whole new world to us.
These sort of two very sort of straight.
Yeah, they're just straight white middle class suburban stay-at-homes.
And we just come across this beautiful.
There's a whole other world of amazing, interesting,
this beautiful rainbow
fantastic
community.
People out there, which would have been completely hidden from us.
Yeah, we would have missed out.
And our lives would have been so much duller without it.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it's great.
It has been fantastic.
Yeah.
So what I was wondering was what helped you personally on this journey, because particularly at the start, it was, I mean, A, it was a shock, and B, we didn't really know anything about it. And I remember you just being your normal pillar of strength. We have a saying, don't we, that you're a super tanker on the ocean of life.
And you're the little boat bobbing up and down and all that.
So you continued your super tanker way of being. But I was wondering, how did you manage that? Because I think, from a counselling perspective, one of the things we talk about is how very difficult it is for men, because men are expected to be strong, and how hard it is for men to be able to talk about what they're going through, and that everybody else is sort of like relying on them, and often your own emotional needs aren't cared for in that. And I just wondered, I don't know if you can talk about that side of things and how you coped.
I think probably in the early days, very, very early days, it's probably just denial. Mm-hmm. Just, it'll blow over. It's fad. And just that sort of possibly wishing it would be different. So that to start with. I mean, I have to say, I don't really have, apart from you, I don't really have anybody I could turn to. And so it wasn't something, when I left the house, it wasn't something I would be discussing with anybody. So, in some ways that makes it easy, in some ways that makes it hard. In some ways it's easy, as you don't have to think about it, because nobody's going to ask you about it, and you won't have to discuss it, at work and the likes.
So work sort of helped you in a sense because it gave you a break.
Oh, it's an escape.
Yeah.
Yeah. Throw yourself into your work, flush everything else out of your head.
Yeah.
Because my work is something that, when you're in it, it completely fills your head.
Yeah.
And so I probably, as you may have noticed, don't try and get any sense out of me when I'm debugging some horrible problem.
Yes, I know.
So I would say I had to carry that, but I'm a person who I think I've always done that, and so that was something that I could do. But it was tough. It was tough. No doubt about it. I had you, and gradually, more, as you're the librarian, you did the research. As more resources, more information came into our lives. You and I were able to talk about it and how we felt about it, and and I think our relationship and the fact that it didn't push us apart, in that we leaned on each other, I think that was very important. Because, like I said, you were probably the only person I was really talking to about it. I mean, I have to say, and this has increasingly been true, and I find this very helpful at the moment. The companies that I work for and the environment in which I work is pretty militantly inclusive. They are very, very vocally inclusive. And so there were resources there, groups there. I mean, only more recently have I actually sort of joined and engaged with some of those groups, going along to some of those network events, as the parent of a trans person, going along, perhaps being a bit more of a visible ally. Because it's just, again, it's just meet great people.
Yeah.
It's good to go along to another, somewhere else. Because I think that's it's a slight tangent, but I think one of the things that, sort of as we've grown into it, talking about the work environment and the work environment being more inclusive, that has been helpful to me, knowing that work, all the places I worked, because I've worked at about 3 different places since the kids have been out. And in all of them, I knew that if I told people or talked about it, then it was safe. And that's really important. And it's really important for anybody who's running a company who's quite senior to know that I also, to some extent, it's not the same. I respect folks who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer, whatever, at work. Them coming out at work is a big deal. But also coming out as the parent of trans adults is a sort of coming out. And it takes, I tell you now, it takes some courage to speak up. And I can see how when people say it's exhausting, it is. It is. When people ask you, how's it with the kids? And people who've known you for some time, how are the boys? You have to think, is now the time I say, actually, it's 2 girls and a boy? I can see how people who are, not out in the workplace just find that constant stream of stuff exhausting.
Yeah, really interesting.
But it's been really good to know that when you do say, this is my situation, I've got 2 trans daughters, that it is safe.
I think it's worth mentioning here that you did know somebody who is quite visibly out.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
And you'd known them when they
I'd known them, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I worked with somebody a very long time ago. Seeing folks like that, and increasingly seeing folks, at very senior levels who are out and who are advocates, I think is quite important, and being able to go and chat to them, and seeing that they're living their life, they're happy with who they are, they're getting on with it, it's fine.
I think that's one of the most important things, I think, for us personally, is actually spending time with transgender people, isn't it? And I think getting to know transgender people at various stages of their lives has been really, really helpful to both of us.
Well, yeah, because again, it just overcomes the, it overcomes the ignorance.
Yeah.
When you start out, you know nothing.
Yeah. We certainly knew nothing.
We certainly didn't. I mean, I say, but you know nothing. Well, in fact, you don't know nothing. And particularly in the current environment, you know the worst made up bits from the popular media. And that's all the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, doubt that they peddle just makes you scared. And in fact, it's all just twaddle.
And, and also we've been exposed throughout our lives to quite transphobic. I was really interested when I watched that documentary about films and how transgender people have been presented in films throughout history, and just how, I couldn't watch it all because I felt so sick. That is the background with which, our understanding of transgender issues was formed, and it's just there, and you don't really realise it until you start digging it up, do you?
No,
it's that unconscious bias, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, and it's not that you want to be a good person, but you've just got these unconscious biases that you're not aware of. Yeah. So the other thing that I think people are sort of quite interested to find out about is what it was like telling people. So we sort of talked about coming out at work, but what about like coming out to your parents and to your friends?
Yeah, I mean, again, when you start off, you just don't know. And I think our youngest has talked about this, about how scary it is. How scary it is, because you don't know what reaction you're going to get. And, with parents and friends and others, you worry because you don't want to lose your relationship with them. And you think, because, you're on side, you're not going to abandon your kids. And you think, if this person cuts up rough and doesn't accept it or has got a big problem with it, how is that going to affect my relationship with them? I mean, it's selfish, but that's what you're worried. That is what you're worried about.
Yeah.
If I go to, we had lots of worries about how my parents might react, and as you know, they were fantastic.
Yeah,
they were fantastic.
Yeah,
and still are. My mum said, "I don't care what they look like. They still come around here. I'm still their granny."
Yeah.
And she was absolutely right to the, she would have accepted them however. And just what a relief. What a relief. But it doesn't take away from the fact that before, that's afterwards, you can look back and think, what,
of course,
it was a breeze. Of course they would. Well, you sort of like to think that people, but you don't know. And I think our youngest has said the same. I think I thought I knew you and I thought you'd be okay, but I didn't know. Until the words were out and it was out there, I didn't know. I mean, the other thing, and we haven't talked about this yet at all, is that of course we're churchgoers.
Yeah.
And so that was the thing for us. You're thinking, how are people going to react to this? Because that can be a really big issue. Is a really big issue. In depending on what sort of church you go to. It can be the end of your relationship with the church. With the church, if you're going to choose to stick with your kids, then you might have to choose that you're not part of that church anymore because they won't have it. Now we are blessed in that our church was. Well, I suppose we're probably, I think if we look back honestly, we are probably part of the catalyst of the journey that our church has been on, because our church is now fully inclusive and has a full inclusivity statement, in its constitution, saying, we accept everybody. If you love God, you want to follow God, get closer to, we don't care who you are, what your circumstances are, just come and be part of the church. And so, our we have a small group of folks who meet fairly regularly, and what a diverse and interesting bunch we are. As parents of,
We've certainly got a diverse and interesting bunch of kids, haven't we?
Yeah, you name it, we've got one.
Yeah.
Somewhere we know somebody who's got one.
But I don't know if you remember what they said when we actually told them.
Yeah.
Because go on. Do you want to tell the story?
Yeah, so we were, sharing the things that were going on. We'd had a meal, possibly a some wine, and we were sharing about what was going on in people's lives and their families, and Joe and I, or Joe probably, plucked up the courage to say, we've got something to tell you. The two kids have come out and they're trans. And one of our good friends said, well, that's just trumped everything.
It was brilliant, wasn't it?
It was brilliant because again, it was a scary moment for us.
Yeah.
Because at that stage, I don't think the church was explicitly fully inclusive.
It wasn't at that point.
It wasn't at that particular point because it's quite 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
I lose track. How long ago was it?
Well, they came out. It's nearly 9 years ago now, I think.
9
Oh,
years.
it is 9 years since they came out.
Yeah, 9 years. So we didn't know exactly what reaction we were going to get. And so there was some tension, certainly on our side.
Yeah.
There was some tension there when we said it, and that remark and the reaction it got from the folks around the table just diffused, and it was just the relief. We just knew we're going to be okay. We're accepted. They're with us on the journey. They may not know what it means, but they've got, we've got our kids back and they've got our back.
Yeah.
And we're all in it together.
Yeah. And I think I think one of the sort of really wonderful things about that was their care for us and their care for us as parents, and their understanding that actually for us this was a really big thing. And not only were they obviously concerned for our kids, but they were really concerned about the impact on us and what we needed, and supported us in what we were going through as well. As well as, I don't know if you remember, that one of our church members came around to see me and spent quite a lot of time discussing it because she had some expertise in working with transgender people. So that was so
the church
supportive.
turned out to be an excellent supportive resource in the end, and our pastor was just because we went round to see David together, didn't we? And he just said, and he was the same. And I suppose because it comes from the top, doesn't it? Basically, he said, how are you? What do you need? We're here for you. Don't worry. Which was absolutely.
I mean, even as we're talking about it, it sort of makes me fill up a bit, because we did have such amazing support, and I think the other thing is obviously, just moving slightly away from the church as well, was when we told all our friends, and the reaction we had from friends as well. I don't know if you can recall that.
I'm trying to think. I can't think of any specific instances other than just that all the friends that I can think of were just they're friends. They're our friends, and they're our friends for a reason. And they had much the same reaction as us, and certainly all your friends who you're quite close to were all on board and very supportive, and because we did need it. I mean, we shouldn't gloss over it. I mean, we've talked a little bit about it. How did you cope, and so on and so forth. It has been tough at times. It has been really tough, and we have needed those people. As we work through our fears and uncertainties and perhaps the shock, there have been quite serious ups and downs. And there's been times when we've sort of railed against it, and
especially at the start.
At the start, when it's all fear and doubt and uncertainty, we needed to lean on those relationships and know that people were there supporting us, and that was very, very important. And reflecting on that, thinking about it, does just make you think, gosh,
I think we've been very lucky, actually, with the support that we've had.
Very lucky with the groups of people we had around us, and that's made it so much easier. I mean, if the church had rejected us, or any of our good friends, and it would have been really hard, because how involved we are and how much we get out of it. I mean, another part I didn't say at the start. Another part of me is I play guitar. I love playing the guitar, and I play guitar in church quite a lot. And to have lost that would have been a real blow.
Is there anything you wish that you'd handled differently?
Well, I mean, I suppose it's about many situations you're in. I mean, it's not I'd handled differently. I just wish we'd known more at the start. Would have made it a lot easier if we hadn't just had all the the misinformation and the, the sort of rather phobic nature of sort of popular media and popular coverage, which is just getting worse. My hope is that is just the play of the minority. Because, as we have said, perhaps people should take that as if I would want people to take anything away in terms of encouragement, that is the, our experience has been that the vast majority of people, the vast majority of people that we have come across are very supportive and think that's, if that's who they are, that's fine. I don't, that's fine. It's there's nothing wrong with that. That's, if that's who they are, then they should get on and just live their lives the way they are, and we'll all just get along. We'll all just be fine. It's only the people who are driven by fear and the people who peddle fear that are the problem. And it really is a sort of phobic ideology, this ideology that's driven on fear of the unknown, fear of different, and so on and so forth. And it's doing terrible damage, and they should stop it and be ashamed that they've even started it. Because that is not what that's not most people's experience. I mean, and increasingly as it's only a small number, it's not a small number, it's lots of people, but it's a small proportion of the population. Even though it is a small number of the population, the number of people it affects, the brothers, the sisters, the mothers, the fathers, the grannies, the grandpas, the aunts, the uncles, the friends, the colleagues, once you multiply that up, you think, no, probably a significant proportion of the population have got somebody trans in or around them, and they're okay with that because they, like you say, the more we got to know trans people, the more we read about, some of the excellent, you should probably post some of the, and probably do, some of the resources that you've leaned on, some of the excellent trans advocates, trans people who are advocating in the public arena, so well-informed, well-educated, very articulate folks, so you should listen to them because that's, they're the people who are living it. And they're the friends and allies of the people who are living it. And there's an awful lot of them because.
Yeah. It's really difficult because I think there's so much hate and disinformation out there.
Yeah. Just made up nonsense.
Yeah, and I think that silences those of us who do have transgender loved ones. And some of that is because we want to protect them. And, people say they've never met a transgender person, but a lot of the time they don't know that they've met a transgender person.
Well, absolutely.
Which is one of the things. And also, you don't know who might be related to a transgender person who is not talking about it because that transgender person is not out publicly. Yeah. And I know in talking to other transgender parents that it's actually very difficult for them because they can't say anything because their child isn't prepared to come out because they don't feel safe to do so.
Yeah.
And therefore the parents find it very difficult to speak out as well.
And they find it, because they can't speak out, therefore you can't connect with other parents or other,
or you have
other
to connect
folks
in secret. And I think, for me, this is a plea to people who can speak out, to speak out. And that's part of the reason why we're doing this, because we feel okay to speak out. Yeah.
And it's getting over this, it's a tiny minority.
Yeah.
It's not. The number of people who are affected by this is not a tiny minority. I suspect if you do the maths, which I do quite like, if you do the maths of the network effects of...
Well, it's 0.5% of the population are trans.
And if they're involved with 10 people, that's 5% of the population. If every one of those trans people is involved with 10 people, and that's quite a small number, you could probably use a bigger number than that. The number of people who are affected by trans issues is 5 million people.
Yeah. In the UK, yeah.
In the UK.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of people. And, you know, that is not a small minority. And in fact, when you think about it, you could probably use a bigger multiplier than that. You could probably use 20 and not be exaggerating.
Or
and before
100,
you know
yeah.
it, before you know it, it's 10 million people. So, you know, we should lean into that and sort out our relationship with trans people, you know, and make it a much more welcoming environment. I mean, it's odd, isn't it? It's that, and that's the frustrating thing about that horrible word, the trans issue. You know, that's a miscasting of what we're talking about. The trans people are okay. The relatives and friends and family of trans people, they're okay as well. The issue is the phobes. Just the core of the issue is that some people are just phobic. You know, they've got deep-seated reasons why they are anti, and they're generating the problem. That's the problem. And there are other people then profit from that because they see it as an easy win, and you can, you know, kick somebody when they're down, for which they should be ashamed. But the issue is the phobes, not the trans people. And so the sooner we move on to the phobe issue and what we're going to do about that, the better.
The problem is prejudice. Yeah.
Yeah, the problem is prejudice. In the same way that, you know, if you look at race relations in this country, you wouldn't say it's a people of colour issue. It's not. It's a racist issue. The racists are the problem, so let's call it what it is. The phobes are the problem, not the trans people. So let's move on and talk about the real thing, and that is how do we deal with the phobes and the people who peddle phobia?
This is something we both feel quite strongly about, isn't it? Because obviously we want to protect our kids. There is this concern for us about them being able to move about safely, and also because we know our kids and we know they're not predators, despite the fact that that's the way they're painted in social media. And like most trans people will tell you, all they want to do is to be able to live their lives in peace and to live their lives happily and fulfilled. They don't want their whole life to be about transgender issues. They want to be getting on with their lives. And I personally believe, and I'm sure you agree with me, that, you know, our kids coming out, you've said this throughout, is that they're happier and more fulfilled in being their true selves. And that enables them to concentrate on other aspects of their lives. They don't have to fight this all the time. But the situation where there's such a hostile environment means that it becomes frightening. And it takes up all of our time, doesn't it? It, you know, like you were saying about people coming out at work and that sort of emotional weight that they have to carry, and that's what's going on for transgender people at the moment, that they, you know, often it's really difficult for them to be getting on with their lives and to be happy and fulfilled because they're living in fear, and that's sort of part of our passion, really, isn't it, is to try and make the world a better place for them. And that's why we're doing what we're doing.
It's like we've said numerous times here, our job in general is to let the trans folks know they are okay and create an environment in which it's okay to be who they are, and we're not going to put barriers in the way of them being that, and we're not going to shame them or be hateful towards them. Be creating a safe environment in which they can be who they are. Now they're just going to be better for everybody, to be honest. Better for everybody, but particularly, we've done this before with minorities, hating on these minorities, and the sooner we get over it, the better. It's better for everybody. If we just learn to get on with people living their lives the way they're going to live it, it'll just be better, just nicer. it's our phrase, isn't it? In the end, we will out nice people, because that's a better way to live. It's a better way to live than the fear and the hate.
So I just want to say thank you for coming on my podcast and supporting it. And, this is not just because Tim's actually speaking out loud on the podcast today. It doesn't mean he's never been involved in it. And I certainly don't think the podcast wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have happened without his sterling support in the background and, his part that he plays in our family and the support that he gives me and the kids. And thank you, because that means, I know, it means the world to all of us. So thank you for being who you are. I love you loads.
You too, and thank you for having me on. It's been great.